Welcome, everyone, to the MMA Happy Hour podcast. I am Kyle Anthony, your host, where today we are talking UFC Kansas City, headlined by Ian Machado, Garry, and Carlos Prates. We're going to be breaking down 4 plays here on the show today. And listen, we are coming off a fantastic card 2 weeks ago at UFC 314, cashing in nearly 12 units of profit for clients. 5-0 on our client plays. Just an absolutely fantastic card overall. Now, if you want to become a client, link down in the description. We've got 10 straight UFC events coming up. A great run here that we're going to have. Really like some cards that are coming up here. So if you want to become a client, link down below. And with that being said, let's just dive into the main event of the evening between Ian Machado, Garry, and Carlos Prates. Now, you've got Ian Machado, Garry. He's minus 125. On the comeback here, you've got Carlos Prates. He is plus 105. Now, this is definitely going to be a very much a, minute winner versus moment winner type of fight here. We got Ian Machado, Garry, who is a high-level kickboxer who really likes to push a high pace, push a high volume, but doesn't have the power. More of a death by accumulation, going to push out the volume and look to win that way. Where the other side here, we've got Prates, who is another high-level kickboxer, but the guy is a finisher overall. The guy has 21 victories, 16 by KO, 3 by submission, and you've got Machado that has 15 victories, 7 by knockout, and 1 by submission. Where more as of late, he's been more of kind of a point fighter overall. But going back and watching tape, one of the biggest issues that I have with Carlos Prates is going to be how low volume he is. I think this is really a massive concern for anybody that's looking to be backing Carlos Prates this weekend. And you look at it, the guy does have the power. He does have the, ability to land the big shots, have those big moments, look for those finishes. But at times, just not letting his hands go in situations he probably should be. And that can be concerning when you're starting to face some of the higher level, elite level fighters. Now, even recently, not too long ago against Trevin Giles, I thought it was not the greatest look. Yes, he got the victory, but not the greatest look. We're in that first round. Giles was really piecing up Prates. I mean, he was landing a nice jab, nice 1-2 combinations, really pushing out the volume, outlanding him, and really just had a lot of issues there for Prates early in that fight. And even into the second, Giles was finding a little bit of success more. And then Prates does what Prates does. He lands a big shot, gets the finish. And, that is, again, his big win condition here is finding that knockout. That's really a win condition that he really needs in this point instead of, really winning or banking rounds. But even in that fight against Giles, Giles still outlanded him in that round and a half. Outlanded him 68-37. And that's a pretty wide gap overall. And now you're about to face Ian Machado, Garry, who brings more weapons, more tools to the stand-up game than Giles. And I think that's going to be an interesting dynamic. And you also even look with the Leech, Li Jingliang, 37-year-old, end of his career type of fighter. And, even there, it was competitive when you're just talking about the volume. They both were landing very similar amounts. I think it was 40 something for Li Jingliang, and then it was 50 something for Prates, but Prates, the harder hitter, landed the big shots and able to find that finish. Now, Garry on the other side here, though, he's just very defensively sound, very tricky on the feet, good footwork, and very risk adverse. And I think that, to me, can really help him in this particular spot where a guy that might not have that volume, might not be pushing that type of pace here. And Ian is another guy that, just is able to kind of steer clear of danger and then land his 1-2 combinations and land his counters. He absorbs less than 3 significant strikes per minute, while Prates absorbs nearly 5 significant strikes per minute and has a negative striking differential. And I think, again, it can work when it's working for Prates, landing the big shot, having those fight-changing moments. But if he doesn't, he can start to fall behind the scorecards, start to get desperate for bigger shots. And I think that can be a big concern here. And Prates is looking for those exchanges. He wants to force, those pocket exchanges when he can and when he's looking to do it. Take one to give one. He believes in his power, where Garry's going to look to stick and move. He's not going to be standing in the pocket. He's not going to be, he's not a guy that's very stagnant, that stays in one spot. He stance switches. He gives you different looks. And I think the volume and those types of movements are really going to find him a lot of success, in the main event on Saturday night. And you also add in the leg kicks. I think that Garry is going to chop away at the leg early and often, and that's also going to mix things up for Prates. maybe make him a little bit more gun shy than he already is. And I think that can be problems. Plus, I do like that Garry can mix in the takedowns. Now, I don't think he's going to be diving at legs throughout this fight, but he's going to look to mix it up. The camp he comes from, they are going to implement that type of game plan here. And I think that can, again, be an opportunity and a path for Ian Garry to find some success, mix it up, give different looks to Prates, who may already not be a high volume striker. And then lastly is going to be the cardio here. Now, I'm not saying that, Prates doesn't have cardio. It's hard to quantify what, he says smoking 15 cigarettes a day does. But with that being said, it could be that he might not have the cardio. The reason why maybe he isn't a high volume striker is because he doesn't have the cardio to really fuel the high volume striking type of matchup here, and that can be concern. Now, again, that's not the end all be all on the Prates side, but I do think that is a cause for concern here. So I like Ian Garry here. I think the strength of schedule, I think the style, I think the volume, his footwork, can mix in some takedowns is a lot of positive things, for him to defeat Prates here. So I'm taking Ian Machado Garry at -125 to get the job done. Next one here we're going to talk about is going to be Ming Yang Zhang -520 up against Anthony Smith +390. Now, this year, right out the gate, this feels like a smash spot for Zhang. I mean, it just really feels like an absolute smash spot for Zhang. And I think one of the biggest issues here that when you're looking at Anthony Smith is the red flag is it's his retirement fight, right? This sounds like this is the end of his career. It sounds like this is pretty much his swan song when it comes to the UFC. He's going to be in the booth, but pretty much hasn't this guy had one foot kind of out the door already? But either way, he's 36 years old. He's probably 56 years old on MMA mileage overall. And this is a spot where we know the decline is there. We know it's there. We know the decline is happening. We know this is the end. And you also look at it now, Zhang, this is a guy that the UFC absolutely wants to build up. They want to build this guy, being from China. This is a spot where, hey, they want that market share. They want that viewership. And they're going to build this guy. He's 26 years old. He's just only going to get better. And he's, a guy that is going to be marketable. He's got some highlight reel knockouts. He's a finisher. And that to me is really where some of this could really, play into effect here, because he's got 100% finish rate right now. He's got 18 victories, all by stoppage. He's got 12 knockouts, 6 submissions. And even the crazier part about all of that is that every single one of his victories have come in the first round. I mean, this guy is a guy who does not waste time. He goes out there, he looks for those finishes, and that's what he's going to be looking to do. Now, at this point here, I just don't think that, Anthony Smith absorbs shots very well. I just think nobody really wants to take punishment in the cage, but I just don't think he is at that point, has that dog in him anymore. And he just has far less power. I mean, that's the thing here that I think that Zhang can comfortably move forward. He's not going to be scared of anything that Anthony Smith is really throwing offensively, landing any types of heavy shots. He's very stagnant. He doesn't really have this great footwork either. I think that is going to allow these pocket exchanges to be happening with Zhang, looking to land the bigger shots. And, Smith now, he's 37-21 as a pro. That is a ton of MMA fights over his career now. And just, I think the durability has started to crack. That is all starting to end, I think, for him. And I think this is a spot here where the exchanges are going to be happening. He's going to look to move forward. He's going to look to land big on Smith. Smith is also probably somewhat willing to stand in the pocket and throw if he's going to be doing that. And I think that that's just an absolute death sentence for Smith in this fight here. Plus, I do think the big part here is Smith needs to get takedowns. If he wants any type of opportunity to win this fight, I think he needs takedowns. Now, Zhang also does have grappling ability, so it's not that he's going to be some slouch on the ground, but I think he needs it because I don't think he can stand and trade shots with Zhang over 15 minutes and think he's going to see the bell. I think that this is going to be where he needs takedowns. And then you look at it, it's just not really historically a path that Smith takes. He averages less than half a takedown per 15 minutes over his long UFC career. That is not something that he's going to be looking to all of a sudden just, implement on his retirement fight. I think he's going to be willing to exchange. I think he's going to be willing to try to, throw something and land something to get that finish. But I think this is a guy that starts getting tough, I think he's going to start to shell up. I think there's going to be opportunities there. Even if this fight hits the ground, I love the ground and pound that Zang brings, just deadly, heavy shots. And I think that this is just going to be the end here. So in this spot here, getting off the big minus 520 number, you can bet Zang by knockout in the first or second round is minus 150. And I think that that's a pretty solid number. If you want to get a little bit more of a better number, obviously you can just go the first round. It's where a lot of his fights do end in the first round. But even if you're getting that extra round in the second, it's only minus 150. I think it's a solid number here. And I do believe he probably brutally puts out Anthony Smith. So I'm going Ming Yang Zhang inside the first 2 rounds by knockout minus 150. And the next one here we're going to talk about is going to be Randy Brown minus 235. On the comeback here, you got Nicholas Dalby plus 195. Now, the big reason why I do believe Brown is the big favorite here is first being the fact that Dalby's 40 years old. And that's already going to, get money going the other way automatically, just on the simple fact that he's old. And then you add in the fact, obviously, that, Brown's going to have a 4-inch reach advantage. The guy, no doubt, is going to be the better striker. Between these two guys, he's going to have that reach, utilize some of his range, and find success at those distance strikes, good distance management. So there are the things that he's going to have that I think can help him in this spot here. But for me here, the style at which Dalby fights is going to be very difficult, I think, for Randy Brown. And I think the first thing being that Randy wants to have that range fight. He wants to have that distance fight. He wants to utilize his reach, utilize his, he's a long, lanky fighter. He does fight well, behind the jab and behind his reach. But I think a guy like Dalby, who is very, very durable, the guy has not been finished, and is a guy that can come forward. And that's going to be something that he's going to be looking to do here, where pressure, I think, is going to be a big problem here for Brown, who's not going to want to be in the clinch, who's not going to want to, be in tight, who's going to want to skirt on the outside. If this was in the apex cage, I think this would be a really good spot, for Dalby, especially if we're talking this price tag here. But I still think that there's opportunity here for Dalby and just looking to move forward because he's not going to stop. That's the one thing. Dalby can weaponize his cardio. He can move forward. He's going to consistently move forward, and he's going to be able to take the damage when he's moving forward and cutting that distance here. And I think that not giving Brown any type of space is going to allow Dalby to implement his game plan. Now, I think he could just win positionally. This may not be, some spectacular victory from Dalby, but I think that he can go in there, cage push Brown up against the fence, try to get him down, maybe take him down, maybe Brown steps back up, then he kind of, positionally wins, dirty boxing. And I feel like that's kind of going to be a rinse and repeat here, where you're going to have Dalby, who is just going to kind of look to latch on, and the guy's got the cardio. There's no doubt about it. And his weird breathing that he does, he's going to have the cardio to really push that type of pace. And I think that's where he's going to find success here. So I do think that's going to frustrate Brown. I think Brown's going to really look to try to find opportunity to get space, to work his offense. And he's just going to really struggle with that. And I think, again, at nearly a 2-to-1 dog here, Dalby is absolutely live, I think, in this spot here. And, plus you got to look at even the most recent fight for Brown, against Brian Battle. Battle was, looked like Brown was finding success landing, and then Brown found success landing, and then Battle kind of came back and said, all right, I'm just going to hold you up against the fence, win positionally, and just do that, and just keep banking rounds. And I think that Dalby does that almost even better than Brian Battle, where he can just kind of, bully you and just kind of hold you and clinch you. And I think that's where this goes here. So I do like Nicholas Dalby here. I think at this price tag, I don't like, Brown when you're talking about him, minus 250 range. I think that's just very high, very, very high here. So in this spot, I'm going Nicholas Dalby. I think the value is on his side at plus 195. And the last one here we're going to talk about is going to be Robert Romero minus 125 against Timmy Kawamba plus 102. Now, these are two young prospects that are coming off losses. Now, you do have Kawamba, who got beat up by Lucas Almeida. Not a good look. Got dropped, rocked a couple times there, lost. And then you have Romero, who came in on days' notice against David Onama and went out there, dropped Onama, had some success, did have a good account of himself for a guy that came in on day's notice. And I thought it was a pretty solid performance from him, although he lost and started to wilt at a point there and gassed out. But either way, I thought it was a solid performance from him. But the big red flag here now for the Kuwa side is really going to be the pressure again. To me, it's that type of pressure is going to cause problems for a guy who really wants to skirt on the outside, who kind of wants to circle at range. And I think that's where he's going to really struggle. Now, he does have some decent striking. He does have some decent hand speed. He does have some boxing. There are some things that he can do. But again, the low volume and skirting on the outside and looking to do that type of fight, I think isn't a way that he's going to find success in this fight here, where Romero is a very aggressive fighter. He's going to come forward. He's going to march forward. He's going to throw volume, and he's going to stay in your face. And I think that is going to really crumble someone like Kuwa, who I don't think is prepared for that type of fight. Nor do I think he, anytime that's happened, he can be a good hammer, but if anything doesn't go his way, I think that he really struggles to find any type of success there. And I think that's where he can move forward. He can land the bigger shots. He can pick his shots, mix in some takedowns. And I also do think that, when you're talking about, maybe Kuwa being on the back foot for like 3 rounds, where does his offense come from? I don't really see where he can really push off some of the offense and land his own offense. And the aggressive style here, I think that he's going to brawl. I think Kuwa is going to push forward. He's going to crash the pocket, and he's going to really look to mix it up that way. And I think that he's going to have those bigger moments. Even if there is somewhat of close moments, I think in each round, you're going to see Romero land a big shot, hurt Kuwa, control the center of the cage, optically look good for the judges if there is no finish in this fight here. And I think there's a lot of things that keeping Kuwa on his back foot, backpedaling for most of the fight, where you're going to have Romero pressing, throwing the volume, and landing. I think it's really a nice setup for him to get this job done. So landing the more impactful shots, maybe getting the finish, but I do like the fact that he can out-volume him over 3 rounds. So I'm going Robert Romero to get the job done. So there you have it for my plays for UFC Kansas City. If you want to become a client, link down in the description. Again, got plays up this weekend. We've got 10 UFC events lined up, coming up. So let's lock in and let's cash.